You know, in 1989, the Unitarian Universalist Association created the Seventh Principle Project. It was kind of an affiliated environmental organization appended to the UUA. By 1991, that Seventh Principle Project had published the Green Sanctuary Handbook with the intent of integrating environmental consciousness and faith-based community. The idea was they were imagining a congregational life reflective of our seventh principle of Unitarian Universalism, the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. About a decade later, in 1999, Fred Small, who was a well-known early promoter of the Green Sanctuary concept, proposed a comprehensive Green Sanctuary program as his Harvard Divinity School thesis. In Small's proposed Green Sanctuary, congregations were invited to engage in a series of actions to address environmental issues, resulting in the congregation receiving recognition or accreditation as a Green Sanctuary congregation. After a presentation at the 1999 General Assembly, a group of activists took on the challenge of translating Small's proposal into a functional program. They convened a task force to add new material to the manual, and they crafted a step-by-step congregational process. Green Sanctuary's second edition was ready for distribution in the fall of 2000, and a pilot program in 2002 saw 5 congregations complete the program, following with 3 more in 2003. These early adopters illustrated Green Sanctuary's potential, but it also recognized that there was a requirement for more flexibility to be truly accessible to congregations of varying sizes, capabilities, geographic locations, and organizational cultures. So Green Sanctuary's third edition came out in 2003, and in this case, they invited congregations to create their own activities and projects, encompassing all aspects of congregational life. And by 2005, when the Seventh Principle Project was actually folded into what we now know as the Unitarian Universalist Ministry for Earth, there were 31 accredited Green Sanctuary congregations. KUUF started its Green Sanctuary planning around 2010 and was accredited in 2011. Our statement of support for our Green Sanctuary declared, "The Keweenaw Unitarian Universalist Fellowship's vision is a world with justice for humanity and the whole web of life, including present and future generations. Together we can create a world in which all people make reverence, gratitude, and care for the living earth central to our lives." And over the next 10 years, our Green Sanctuary created our own activities and projects, all of them intended to provide opportunities for our members to focus on our vision. And these projects included the Sustainability Film Series, a public event that is now in its 10th year, forums and green tours on green living in our community, an environmental book group, a carbon offset program, monthly outings entitled Get UU Out, sort of nature walks, work with Habitat for Humanity, postcard Sundays, local food potlucks, a whole effort to reintroduce the American chestnut tree to the UP, environmental activities for our religious education and kids programs, and partnerships with community recycling, environmental and education programs, and an additional partnering with Michigan Tech and BHK to generate a solar energy assessment for the Houghton BHK building. And there are more, but that's a list that gives you a sense of how our Green Sanctuary has been and continues to be generating effective environmental justice actions. In her essay, Transforming Unitarian Universalist Culture, in the book Justice on Earth, Pam Spar, who is the UU Service Committee's Director of Advocacy, Activism, and Engagement, and she wrote, "Many of our congregations have led the way in their communities by purchasing renewable energy, replacing light bulbs, weatherizing buildings, and installing solar panels. These are important steps to demonstrate how to reduce carbon emissions, but they do not require us to change our relationships of privilege and power to other people. They do not require us to change our economic or political system. They hint at, but do not directly speak the language of morality." We live in a time calling for courageous action to fight climate change. In this same moment, we are recognizing that our environmental work is intersectional. Environmental and human injustices are being revealed as linked. And echoing Spar's comments, the UUA's Green Sanctuary website now suggests that a new level of congregational engagement is required as we move forward. And they write that we envision Green Sanctuary congregations that are infused with a spirit and passion to join others in life and planet-saving work. We recognize that our work must be intersectional, as described in the United Nation Funds for Sustainable Development Goals that start with the elimination of poverty, and for which climate change is an integral part. So, in 7 minutes here, I've gone through a brief history of the Green Sanctuary movement, pointed at the changes in the future of that movement, and landed us at climate change and the elimination of poverty. These global challenges may seem impenetrable for a tiny congregation perched on Lake Superior. I want to share what we are doing way up here alongside the big lake that connects us to people. And as Jennifer Nordstrom said in the chalice lighting, these are our first moves in the direction of making big changes. But right now, I'm going to ask for just a brief musical interlude from Alex here. And then after Alex plays for a minute, I'll come back and finish the talk. Thanks, Leonard. Thanks, Alex. And there's going to be a little dreaming in this next section, so that was an appropriate bit of music there. In April 2019, about 8 KUUF members and friends held a series of 3 or 4, I can't remember, meetings on a big idea. In the months prior to those meetings, we had gone through a comprehensive strategic plan process, and one of the call-outs in those strategic discussions was that we needed to find a coherent action that identified KUUF to the broader community. Something that would help people recognize KUUF and understand what we're about because of what we do. So that was one of the first reasons why those 8 folks gathered together in April. We were going to come up with a big idea that could identify KUUF in the community, and folks would know what we were about through the work we did to make that big idea real. The big idea was going to be called the KUUF Farm. It was so big, we started talking at the level of sustainable agriculture and responding to durable poverty in our own neighborhoods. We weren't hesitant to start where I left off the first half of this talk. We were talking about penetrating the impenetrable. The general idea was to grow fresh food and share it with families and individuals who needed it. We were going to look at enough land for the KUUF Farm so we could build this big gazebo roof and hold outdoor services each summer. Outdoor services in the middle of our farm. I remember the glint in Pete and Laura's eyes at those meetings when they almost simultaneously declared, "We need a tractor." The conversations whittled away at big issues and ended up more focused on agronomy, as my brother would say, you know, the science of soil and crop management, with a dash of labor management thrown in. The sun wasn't right. The dirt was too clayey. All of you are too old to work a row. And I'll take responsibility. The KUUF Farm stopped before it really started. I let the weight of the agronomy concerns overwhelm whatever capacity we could offer to balance the scale. But the farm idea had taken root in the hearts of a few folks, and they proposed to start Grow an Extra Row, gardening for our souls. This would build on existing gardens where agronomy issues were already settled. Sun, dirt, and labor were already at work. We would ask folks to share some of what they grew so we could offer it to our neighbors in need. And to be introduced and develop relationships with our neighbors in need would be the first step in what SPAR called on us to do to change our relationships of privilege and power to other people. Just the first step, but absolutely a first step, and we had to take it. In this first year, it became clear. Some of our Grow an Extra Row gardeners really know how to grow stuff. And some of us wouldn't know fish emulsion if it swam up and bit us on the nose. But we're all growing stuff. Seeds and dirt and water. It's absolutely wondrous and mystifying to me. Cece and Patrick, a couple of our young gardeners, came over to my house and helped me plant seeds in these little plastic trays. And I moved those trays around inside my house for weeks, catching sun underneath different windows. And then I planted them into big pots and stuck these big pots very innocently on a north-facing deck at my house. But tomorrow, I'll be delivering my first load of tomatoes as part of the second delivery of the Grow an Extra Row project for this year. Our delivery team will stop by 5 families on Monday. There's that one single mom with 2 kids who we met actually 5 months ago after a DHS caseworker called and asked if we could help her with rent and utilities. At that time, she was quarantined in her apartment, sick with 2 kids, and she couldn't go to work. Our caring committee and our ministerial discretionary fund paid her rent for that month and her utilities for that month. That was back in March. Now, in August, she's back working, and she is overjoyed to receive fresh vegetables and continue her connection with KUUF. We have received additional referrals of families in need and are certain to expand the number and quality of those relationships next year. We are grateful to, I think I was told it was 12 gardeners supporting Grow an Extra Row in this first year. And Carol told me the other night that she had tallied it up and 28 members of our congregation had helped in some way during this first year of Grow an Extra Row, whether that was packing the boxes of veggies or making up recipes that we could give to the families. Some folks wrote limericks and jokes and we printed them up and shared them in the boxes. Some folks baked little zucchini breads, beautiful little zucchini breads, or they made coleslaw. These were real life examples of what to do with all this fresh stuff we were delivering to people. There were folks making the deliveries, making calls, and getting to know our neighbors. 28 people, that's about a third of our congregation. And this is the first step. As we grow an extra row, we are growing our understanding of poverty in our community. With each delivery of vegetables, when we're greeted with smiles and even tears, with folks saying, we just don't know what to say. This is so wonderful, you're sharing this. We are growing relationships with people and learning more about the challenge of poverty. We're not challenging poverty systemically yet. We're really in the social service end of the spectrum I talked about last week. But remember, this is our first step, and the richness of this work will be defined by the depth of our relationships with folks experiencing poverty, a relationship that is deepened each time we visit their porch. Someday, we're going to need a tractor. Our recognition of sustainable local agriculture is part of a broad response to climate change, just as someday we're going to join with others to restructure our social and economic systems to be more just and loving. We've taken the first step. Thanks to all who took that first step with Grow an Extra Row this year. We welcome everyone next year. And hey, maybe this will be that big idea after all. Thank you. I want to say something before we go to the next hymn. There's another chance of building relationships and gardening that has shown up in the last week. And I want to reiterate this for people. It's in your digest from last week. It's called Garden for Heart, which is sympathetic in name to ours. And the Keweenaw Bay Indian community is inviting folks to volunteer at the Debwe Indigenous Gardens coming up at the end of August and in September. This flyer is in your digest. I encourage you, you like gardening and you like the opportunity to get to know folks, this would be a great opportunity to do so. So I encourage you to check that out in your digest.